Before we start the podcast, I wanted to make you aware of the free vocab worksheet available for you to access right now for this very episode you are about to listen to. It has some of the episode's best native expressions along with their definitions for a non-native learner so that you can keep up with the conversation you are about to hear. Find the link in the show notes or head to thebritishenglishpodcast.com/worksheet. That's thebritishenglishpodcast.com/worksheet. Hello and welcome to the British English Podcast, the show all about teaching you British English whilst giving you a culture-led conversation. I am your host, Charlie Baxter, and in today's episode, we have a conversation with Daisy, who is part of the teaching team of this show's Academy for Online Language Learners. And the reason I have invited her on today is because she has recently come back from a 3-month work trip to Marrakesh. So we're going to be exploring all things Moroccan and giving you the insight a British person has from having lived there for a few months. We cover Daisy's initial impressions, her top tips on travelling there for your first time, Moroccan food, architecture, personal values, and we even discuss religion and how it can shape society. Obviously, just our opinions, but I enjoyed recording this conversation with Daisy. I love how clearly she speaks. We could say she is a true role model when it comes to enunciation. So, without further ado, let's get into this conversation with Daisy. Hello, Daisy. How are you doing?
I'm great, thank you. How are you today?
I'm very good, very good. Yes, I've just done 15 minutes of piano practice because I had a piano for my birthday, and I've been doing 15 minutes in the morning and the evening, and I'm actually getting quite good. It's incredible. There's an app called Flowkey that it's just revolutionized the learning of piano. But yes, how about you? How's your morning been? Have you been playing any piano at all?
Wow, no, that's fantastic. What a great habit to start the day. I would love to start my day with some piano. That would be great. But no, I have had a simpler morning routine. I've got my coffee. It was actually my birthday at the weekend on Sunday, and I have
happy belated birthday.
Thank you very much. I have a kind of obscene amount of chocolate cake left over. So at the moment, every morning consists of chocolate cake for breakfast with my morning coffee. So I've had a nice slice of, this is a great bit of British culture, I've had a nice slice of Colin the Caterpillar.
Do you ever listen to this podcast and think, am I coming away having actually learnt the new vocabulary that I am hearing? Well, if you're unsure, I highly recommend that you grab this episode's free vocabulary worksheet that I have made for you. Grab it now and continue listening to this episode whilst expanding your vocabulary for free. Find the link in the show notes or go to thebritishenglishpodcast.com/worksheet. That's thebritishenglishpodcast.com/worksheet. Oh, yes. Colin the Caterpillar. One of the weddings I went to recently, they had a Colin the Caterpillar Mr. and Mrs., I think. Or maybe it was just a Colin the Caterpillar and they just used that as the wedding cake, which is fantastic. A bit like going off script, isn't it? To have that as your wedding cake.
But
very
at the same
British.
Time, very British. I admire that. I would love a Colin at my wedding. Colin and Connie, maybe.
But Daisy, you've been on the podcast before. Thank you very much for coming back again. If people hadn't heard that episode by now, or haven't heard that episode by now, could you tell the listeners who you are and your professional background as well?
Yes, sure. So I have a background or a career that's almost split in two parts. One part is that I teach languages and I teach English as a foreign language, which is how I came to know Charlie. So I've been teaching on the podcast or for the podcast for a couple of years now, which is maybe how some of you will know me or recognize me. And then the other part of my life or my career is that I am a dancer, a professional dancer. And that is what the previous episode was when I came on and we had a chat about life as a dancer.
Exactly. Yes. Very well put. And the reason that we're here today is again because of your dancing, because that has led you to an adventure abroad. Where did you go for the last, well, you've been back a month. So where did you go during the colder months of the year?
Yes, I was very lucky to escape the worst winter months of the UK, of London. So I was away from mid-January until mid-April. And I was living in Marrakesh in Morocco.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. I was invited to go to Marrakesh recently and sadly I couldn't go, but I was excited and I enviously watched their holiday on Instagram. It looked really nice. What were your initial thoughts, first impressions, when arriving in Morocco?
It's an interesting one because I think I had a lot of preconceptions before going, and that wasn't necessarily from me, but from people around me. People have preconceived ideas of what Morocco will be like, particularly people here in the UK, the people around me. So every time I said, oh, I've got this job, I'm going to go out and live in Marrakesh for 3 months, instead of people saying, well, hey, congratulations, lots of the responses, particularly from the people closest to me, were of concern. So,
Okay.
will you be safe?
Will you be safe? And can you expand on that? Why do British people have this stereotype of concern about going to a place like this?
Yeah, I can't say exactly where it comes from. I think it's partly from the unknown. So if people haven't been, then they make a judgment of what they think it's like, partly maybe from media, partly maybe from just it being such a different culture. And of course, it is a very different culture, a very different place. But yeah, lots of people saying Morocco is dangerous, Marrakesh is dangerous, and often from people who've never visited. So I was hoping in the lead up to my trip that I could prove them wrong, that I would feel safe, that I could come back with positive stories, and that is what has happened. Thankfully, I felt a lot of us said
that is what happened. Yeah,
yeah. A lot of us said at points that we actually felt safer in some ways in Marrakesh than in London, for example, because it's such a hard to describe, but like a warm community, a very kind community, very open, and I think it just gives a really nice feeling to live there. The atmosphere is a really good vibe.
Okay, yeah, that's the information I wanted to hear. So yeah, London. I mean, I saw a reel yesterday saying that mobile phones are taken every 6 seconds. One mobile phone every 6 seconds in London. There's like this new surge of these guys are all in black. I assume it's guys. Let's assume that's the genderless guys. They're all in black and they go on these electric mountain bikes and they kind of circle or just like hover behind young people with their phones out, snatch them, and then just off they whiz on these electric bikes. And there's no hope of catching up with that. So yeah, they're just getting away with it very easily. So yeah, I'd say you've got to be aware of your surroundings in London, but you felt like you didn't necessarily need that extra awareness, heightened awareness in Marrakesh.
No, definitely you need to be aware, and you need to be aware of your surroundings. And I think one of the important things going to Morocco or into the centre of Marrakesh and the old town and the markets, for example, the difference between feeling safe and comfortable and confident and having a bad experience will be your mindset and your awareness. And if you're prepared for it is a chaotic place, right? There's people everywhere, people shouting, very different culture, very overwhelming it can be if you're not prepared. But if you are prepared and you're aware of your surroundings and you're aware of what to do, what not to do, then I think you have a wonderful experience. So I think these things, like we're talking about phones being snatched, I think that probably happens in a lot of places around the world. It happens in London. I think probably happens in Marrakesh, particularly in the souks, in the markets. But yeah, I don't know what I'm referring to in terms of safety. More of a feeling that if you're in need of help, someone will help you, I guess.
Yeah, right. Okay. And that is something that you can only really establish after being somewhere, or just have an opinion on after being there. Like you can read reviews and see statistics, but yeah, that feeling is the thing that I wanted to find out about. Okay. So what about Moroccan hospitality? Would you say, did you have much interaction with locals? Considering you were a dancer in Marrakesh, you probably had quite a few expats around you throughout the experience. Did you get much contact with locals?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't living with a local. I wasn't living with a family or anything like that. We lived just within our team of mostly British dancers. But interactions in the community, interactions with people in the streets, in the shops, in the markets, in the cafes, also at work. A lot of the staff in Budaba, where I was dancing, the staff who weren't the performers were all Moroccan. So yeah, surrounded by locals, not necessarily living with them or best friends who were locals, but yeah, good interactions. And
enough to figure out whether there's a bit of a difference or similarity towards like hospitality in general.
I think, yeah, just very, very hospitable, very open, very warm population, very kind. You have a real feeling of kindness. And I think, like you say, this only comes from really giving it the time to stay there for an amount of time and to have an open mind. So I think it's very much a place where initially, particularly if depends on your personality, depends on your mindset, but initially everything seems chaotic. Initially everyone's shouting, so a big part of the Moroccan culture as well is this, they're all very business minded, so they're all bargaining, they're all trying to get the best deal, they're all trying to entice you into their shop and pay the money, and they're very business minded. But if you actually take the time to get through that and you have conversations with these shopkeepers and you yourself are less direct in saying, I'll give you this amount of money for this product, and you actually ask them about their life and you have a nice chat. And it helps if you speak French, for example, because then you can...
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, so French is the second language after Moroccan Arabic.
Second language.
So it helps if you say a few words in Moroccan Arabic, and then you can switch to French and you can communicate and have a nice chat. And beneath the bravado of the bargaining and haggling and aggressiveness and shouting, everyone is so sweet, and everyone suddenly calms down and smiles and is very kind, very warm, very welcoming to tourists, to foreigners, always wanting to help, always wanting to give you advice or show you the way or share things with you, invite you to do things.
Beautiful. Yeah. So you mentioned that they have this sort of aggressive outer shell, and then once you get in, I mean, talking about the bartering and stuff, but once you get beneath that, they're quite sweet and kind. And did this show up in the daily interactions that you had? I'm assuming that's the case, yeah?
Yeah. Like, for example, we lived in a house, in a complex, in a kind of gated residence with security, but lots of people within that complex, both tourists, locals, families, Moroccan families. And within the complex, we had some cafes, we had some shops, a pharmacy, like a little village in itself. And I would go to the local shop to get simple things, bread, juice, local things for everyday life. And
Yeah.
Marrakesh is very much a city where you've got the rich parts and the poor parts. And there's a big, wide difference between the two. So Budabar would be with people pulling up outside in Ferraris, Bentleys, really elevated prices on the menu, glamorous people, fantastic food. And then you've got the markets or the old town where you've got beggars on the streets, you really see the poverty around you. And in the more local parts of town, the prices, of course, are very different, much lower. So at my local shop, for example, a loaf of bread would cost, I think, 3 dirham, which is maybe like a couple of pennies.
Wow.
So,
a couple of pennies?
Yeah.
For a loaf of bread?
Yeah.
In London, a
loaf
of sourdough
bread,
can be upwards of £8.
Yeah, exactly.
Crazy.
So we're talking crazy prices, very affordable prices, particularly for bread. And I would go to this little shop.
I mean, I would say that, sorry to interrupt, but I would say the crazy thing is the fact that a loaf of bread in London is £8. It's a sourdough, but still, come on. Do you like sourdough? Are you a sourdough consumer?
I am. I do. Yeah. And I was concerned as I started to get used to this life in Marrakesh. I did start to adapt to it, and I started to think, when I go home to London, this is going to be a big shock to go to the bakery and to be told the price of the bread is going to be quite shocking.
Do they have different types of breads there? Like, do they rave about sourdough as we do nowadays?
In general, with the food, I found there's less choice. So a lot of things, you find the same things everywhere. I mean,
Right.
I'm sure we'll go on and talk about food in a moment. But yeah, the bread, you would get the traditional bread mostly everywhere you go. Maybe a few variations, but the traditional bread was a round, quite flat, simple roll that actually all Moroccan bread is quite sweet from my experience. It has a distinct sweeter taste than our bread, which some people loved. I wasn't a huge fan of that sweetness, but it was nice enough bread.
Yeah. Interesting not to have as much choice. Yeah. Did you miss that, having loads of choice?
Definitely. And it meant that at the beginning you would say, this is fantastic, I love Moroccan food, but by the end you would have eaten the same things again and again, and you would say, no, I'm fed up with these dishes. I can't stand one more tagine. But just to go back to the story in the local shop, if that's okay. So I would visit this shop quite regularly, and I knew the young boy who was serving in there, who must have only been 14, 15 years old, I think, helping out his family in the shop.
Yeah.
And there was one day I went in, I picked up a few different things, and I don't know if you know that feeling when you're abroad and I think it was near the beginning, you're not quite used to the currency. So you're kind of trying to add up in your head what that costs and what notes you've got. And it's almost like playing with Monopoly money, that it feels like fake money and you're trying to count it and you don't really know what you've got or what you're paying. So I was counting up and I got to the till and I must have done calculations wrong because I had a 200 note or I had a 20 note. And then he put the things through the till and the stuff I had picked up came to 23 dirham, Moroccan dirham. So I couldn't pay with the 20 because it was 23. So I tried paying with the 200. But he could see my 20 in my hand. And he said, oh, no. Just give me the 20. And inshallah.
Oh,
and
that's nice.
I'm like, inshallah. What does this mean? He's like telling me, no, you can owe me. You can pay me back. It's no problem. And
I thought that meant, don't worry about it. But instead it was,
well, maybe.
I
don't know specifically if he meant don't pay the 3 dirham or pay the 3 dirham later.
Yeah.
But either way, he meant just give the 20, it's fine. Allah, God wills it to be, all of that.
That's lovely.
And being a girl from London, I'm like, no, this can't be. I can't owe someone money. That's terrible. I need to pay you back. I'm going to go straight home and get you the money. So I think the next morning or whenever I came back with the 3 dirhams. And he did kind of laugh at the 3 dirhams. So I think maybe he meant it's fine, don't worry about it. But
Right.
growing up,
Yeah.
how I've grown up, I felt like I couldn't owe this person 3 dirham.
Yeah, that is interesting, isn't it? Yeah, I think that is within our culture. We don't like to not pay the exact amount. And I guess maybe if the culture in Morocco is so sort of haggly, or you can barter, if a shopkeeper doesn't get the exact price, maybe they're more comfortable with that because of their surroundings. Whereas we've grown up with a set price and that's what you have to pay. Otherwise, you don't get it. If you're 5p short, you walk out empty-handed kind of thing.
Yeah. Because that's what in the situation I did. I was like, oh, I'll put back this item. And he was like, no, no, take it. So, just a different way of life.
I guess that's probably sort of, big chains taking the independence away from the actual shopkeeper. Like they can't keep stock, and it gets all confusing for them on an individual level in the UK, I mean. But yeah, that is nice that he trusted you at least, or gave you that. So he didn't want to use the huge note, the 200. Would that have wiped out his cash, like his supply of change?
Yeah, so this was one of the problems we faced constantly throughout the weeks there, that not everything, but a lot of Marrakesh runs on cash. So unless you're in the big Carrefour supermarket, or you're in Budaba, or you're in somewhere very modern, in the modern part of town, everything is cash. And you constantly need cash. But most places will not want you to pay in big cash, like a 200 note. But in order to get cash, you take cash out of the wall, out of the ATM, and it gives you lots of 200 notes. So you have to pay someone with a 200 note to get change. And often it's very difficult, and you get lots of grumbles like, 200 note, do you not have change? And we would say, but someone has to give us change.
Yeah. So does this mean that locals are more like circling the smaller notes between one another, and they're not necessarily using banks in the way that tourists use them?
Maybe.
I wonder.
Yeah, maybe. And maybe because most things won't cost 200. Like 200 to us, 200 in pounds would be like £16. So it's not a huge amount of money to a British person. But 200 Moroccan dirham is, because everything is cheaper out there, and not many things you would be buying in your everyday life would cost 200 dirham. So you wouldn't need that kind of big cash. To a Moroccan person, it's like, oh, that's a really big note. It's like, I guess, in England, trying to pay with a 50 or an 100 note, it's just awkward.
Yeah. Tricky. Yeah, and that's something that I imagine, where you kind of indicated that this is the case, that was such a regular thing. It must have become quite a frustrating experience to encounter on a regular basis, like more than just once a day. Yeah.
Yeah, it would be one of my main... I mean, I think I didn't have many worries in this 3 months. I think I was living a very nice life. But just for context, it would be one of my main worries of the day. How am I going to get 200 notes instead of a 200? But then after living there, you do find your ways. Like, the places to go. You would go in Carrefour to change the change, or you would go to the money exchange places in the old town to change the change. Some places won't have a problem if they're a bigger establishment.
Yeah, I'm glad you managed to find a way. Very resourceful of you. So aside from money being frustrating, were there any other day-to-day routines that were kind of challenging or refreshingly nice? Actually, I wanted to jump back to the choice thing there. So I asked you, was it nice or not nice to have choice? And I think we've gotten to a point where there's too much choice, too much opportunity to feel like you made the wrong choice. So that was why I was thinking maybe it's quite refreshing to have a simplified version of, when you go into a coffee shop now, it's like, What beans do you want? What milk do you want? I just give, how do you want it? Like served kind of thing. With coffee, actually, I really like that. But with most things, I get overwhelmed. And like they ask you, oh, do you want seeds on your loaf? Just give me a bit of bread. Come on. So that was my reference point. But yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Do
you feel like you like a lot of choice in all walks?
Difficult question. I think I can see both sides coming from me as a person, my personality. I'm very indecisive. So in some ways, yes, could get overwhelmed by too much choice and then could spend too long trying to decide. Or if you're in a big queue at a coffee shop and they ask you difficult questions like what beans do you want roasted, and you have no idea what beans you want roasted. Yeah, it's maybe better to have less choice in some ways. But then in other ways, and having lived this in Marrakesh, I think even though it can be overwhelming with too much choice, I think the choice is better than no choice or less choice.
Okay.
To live.
Okay.
Maybe for a short period it's nice, but to live your whole life in that environment, I would rather have more choice.
Yeah.
So for
example, it invites innovation and change. Yeah.
Yeah. So for example, the traditional foods over there were tagine or couscous. And so a lot of
just those two.
Of course, there are other foods, there are other dishes, and it depends where you're eating. And there were actually I found some really gorgeous cafes in the centre that were doing very different things. A bit like here in London, you get all different styles of place, and they would do really exciting dishes. But the basic traditional places, like a local restaurant, or if you went on a day trip and they took you to a restaurant that would prepare that menu for the day trip, it would without fail be, do you want chicken tagine, vegetable tagine, chicken couscous, or vegetable couscous? That was the menu for many places.
Yeah.
So once you've tried the couscous, you've tried the tagine, you've eaten it on every outing you've been on, it starts to wear off a little bit. Because they're
fair enough. I mean, those are two nice dishes, though. I like a tagine. I love couscous, especially pearl couscous. Was it that?
Again, I think this was a funny thing as well. So I had one friend come to visit me from London, and she was saying the whole time before coming out to Morocco, I'm so excited for the Moroccan couscous. I love couscous. I get the couscous in the meal deal at, I don't know if it's Sainsbury's or Tesco's, but there's some Moroccan couscous, and she loves it, and she was really excited to try the real Moroccan couscous. And after having spent a few weeks out there, or a couple of months, I was saying, I think, in fact, I know couscous is the traditional thing here, but I think, in fact, the Sainsbury's Moroccan couscous is much more flavoursome than the original Moroccan couscous. This is quite a plain dish. So these dishes, depending, again, on where you have them, and I did have one really good tagine, for example. I had one really good couscous, depending on who's cooking in what restaurant. But a lot of them, the couscous is very simple, very plain.
Very simple, yeah. Which to some palates is probably delicious, but to a Sainsbury's goer that likes lots of choice in life, maybe it lacks a little bit of flavour. Yeah, that's fair enough. I missed the opportunity to say, so nice they named it twice. Damn it. Just thought of that. I like that one with that joke. We will be leaving the free version of this episode here for today. But if you did want to continue listening to this conversation, then head over to the BritishEnglishPodcast.com, where you can sign up to the Premium Podcast or the Academy. The Premium Podcast gives you the ad-free version with transcripts, a full glossary and flashcards, whereas the Academy gives you all of that plus a whole lot more, including vocab video lessons, writing assignments, weekly Zoom classes, and you can also get paired with a new speaking partner of a similar level to yours each month to really get your speaking practice in. But if you were just here for the free version of this episode, then I thank you very much. Congratulations for getting to the end of this part, and I hope to see you back here next week for another episode. I've been your host, Charlie, on the British English Podcast. Thanks for listening to today's episode. Before you go, don't forget to download the free vocab worksheet specifically designed for this episode so that you can go away feeling satisfied that you've got your listening practice in for the day and expanded your vocabulary. You can find the link in the show notes or visit thebritishenglishpodcast.com/worksheet. That's thebritishenglishpodcast.com/worksheet. What's more is you'll unlock the vocabulary worksheet for every single episode in one go. You're welcome. Happy learning.